objects, oddly enough, can store information about their owners. And especially this information is strong when the object was or became at some time an artifact that people, collectors, found. There are many real cases when the owners of these found things can manifest themselves, or the energy from the object will begin to affect the new owner. There is a category of people who are passionate about archaeology. Well, if for scientific purposes, but there are black diggers who dig in order to find treasure, gold, valuables, or objects that have a sufficient price in a certain market, even sometimes up to several million conventional monetary units. The decorations were, and still are, the most iconic and mystical in this series. A ring, bracelet, tiara, earrings, chain can forever change the life of a new owner if this person starts wearing it and considers it already his own, especially if this jewelry was associated with a deceased person. At the time of death, this object was on this person and still has some kind of energy that a person does not even know about. He guesses. There is a procedure for cleansing found objects, but it is not always effective since prayer, ablution in holy water, acids, and other media will not harm information that has a completely different physical level. They say that objects have a memory. This is the real truth. Once I had an unpleasant episode in my life, after which I stopped doing something. 1998. Winter. The guys in the yard are kicking some kind of piece of iron, playing war. At that time, I was returning from the store with groceries or from work, home. I don't remember exactly. They had already all run home. As it was getting dark, I looked at what they were kicking. It turned out to be a broken, with a crack, German helmet, field, winter, quite massive, painted with light paint. These can be seen in the Chronicle of the War, when German soldiers are shown in winter when they masked their helmets by painting them white. There were no internal straps, balaclava, just a metal helmet. I decided to take it, put it in the basement, storeroom. In order to study, maybe I could find the year of manufacture. At that time, I already had several items in the storeroom. An iron cross from 1939, which was found while digging a trench, a metal buckle of the Wehrmacht, and a corrugated pencil case from a 1944 gas mask, which was in perfect condition. It took some time. 2 years, probably. These items were in the pantry. One day, my friends at school talked about such things. I told my friends that I had. They asked me to bring them to the next session. They were interested. And anyway, as it turned out, it's all sold to collectors on the hump. I decided that I would bring it. When it came time to get ready for the next study session, I decided to renovate a little, to touch up this helmet, since there was green paint. That's where the joke started. In the evening, when I went down to the basement, opened my pantry. There was a light, a table, paint. Began to sandpaper my helmet, removing the old paint. Suddenly, I see that a man's eyes looking at me through a crack between the walls of the pantry, and the face was even visible, sunken, high cheekbones, gray, earth, colored skin, light brown hair, slightly reddish, dark eyebrows. The gap was wide enough. 5-6 centimeters. Probably. I was petrified by what I saw and decided to put the helmet on the table. Carefully left the pantry and decided to look at this man. Who could it be? After all, there could be no one else in the basement but me. I was there alone. 100. As the padlock is hinged, I opened it myself. I tiptoe out of my closet and carefully, leaning my hand on the wooden walls of the neighbors' storerooms, I look into the corridor between the sections of the storerooms, where this gap between the boards was. There stands and looks at me. A tall, thin man in some kind of cape canvas. Like a tent cloak, he has already turned completely to me. His face is kind of strange. The eye sockets are dark. I can hardly see the eyes. The light was dim enough. This hallway was illuminated by a basement window, which was dirty. There was no light bulb in this hallway, or it burned down a long time ago. Then this object turned its back on me and floated away into the darkness of the corridor. Went almost into darkness, as if it had dissolved into it. That's when I got really scared. I ran out without even closing the basement. Only after a while, I went in there with a powerful flashlight, studied everything. There was no one. He locked the doors, took out all the artifacts from the storeroom, and put them in a bag to take them to Moscow. At the Gorbanov DC market, they just almost grabbed it with their hands. Then, when I sold it, I realized that I could sell everything several times more expensive. I bought something home for my little daughter and my wife, and I still have some money left. After that, the desire to collect such things disappeared. My friend's grandmother is a very prominent woman with snow, white hair arranged in a high hairstyle, always well dressed. It's hard not to notice her, and always, no matter how many years have passed, we greeted her. Although her granddaughter has not lived in our yard for a long time. They have an expensive large apartment, and we live in the city center. Her husband holds a high position, and her car always took her to work. In general, there is reason for envy. But in fact, this woman is very intelligent and kind. That's what she said. As always, a man is still quite old. Having money is always an object for women with certain goals, as a rule, much younger than his legal wife. It so happened that my friend's grandmother began to notice oddities in her husband's behavior. Then after work, then he will go to a business meeting, etc. And one day he became very ill. With acute pains, he was taken away in an ambulance, and the woman was confronted with the fact that her husband needed long-term treatment for unknown reasons. The doctors failed to diagnose him immediately, and he was sent for a long-term examination. Weeks passed, but her husband did not feel better, and other oddities began. After my husband was taken to the hospital, it became difficult to stay in their apartment. An unbearable stench began to come from somewhere. Certain silhouettes appeared, and my grandmother also told me that one day she was sitting at home alone and watching TV. Suddenly it seemed to her that someone ran past. Then again, something pretty big, maybe the size of a cat. Yes, it also spun like a top. The carpet it crawled under seemed to be stirred by the wind. After that, she became so scared that the unfortunate woman decided to turn to a person with psychic abilities, popularly to a sorcerer. She was immediately recommended a reliable person, not the one who advertises in the newspaper, but a real village hermit sorcerer who lives somewhere in the region and is quite difficult to get to. If it wasn't for acquaintances, she wouldn't even know where he lives. Eerily, when she arrived at his house, the sorcerer, a gloomy old man, was waiting for her on the threshold, as if he already knew about the arrival of a visitor. It was clear from the first words that he knew everything. That's what he said. "It's all your husband's mistress's fault. He brought her home while you were gone, and she, I see it, put something in the pillows. Look in the pillows. Look in the pillows. There's a reason for everything. If nothing is done, your husband will die, and you will have no life in this apartment. What you find in the pillows, you will carry in a blind bag. Do not touch it with your hands. to a wasteland where people do not walk, and burn it, pronouncing the words that I will teach you. Leave, without looking back. The woman went home in shock, and the first thing she did was rip open the pillows on which she and her husband slept. There was no limit to her surprise and fear. Inside, all the pillows were neatly cut out, and inside were enclosed something like memorial wreaths, dried flowers, etc. She wrapped it all in bags, as the sorceress said, without touching it with her hands, and carried it to the wasteland. When the woman threw it into the fire, it didn't want to burn at first, but when she began to say special words, the muck immediately crackled and smoke poured out. She decided to leave immediately, but her legs wouldn't obey her. I couldn't get out of my seat, that's all. Then she began to repeat the words of her grandfather again, and it seemed to let her go. She left, without once looking back. After that, everything stopped in the apartment. My grandfather felt better and was discharged. How they reconciled is another story, but about the woman with whom her husband had an affair, my friend's grandmother soon found out that she was seriously ill.